My name is Anne Prescott, and I'm the director of the Five College Center for East Asian Studies. Our member institutions are Amherst College, Hampshire College, Mount Holyoke College, Smith College, and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, all in the Amherst-Northampton area of Western Massachusetts. The center's primary work is creating and implementing K-12 educator professional development programming as a part of the National Consortium for Teaching About Asia, funded by the Freeman Foundation. Today, I'd like to talk about Walking the Tokaido, a program developed for K-12 educators to learn about the history and culture of Japan by virtually walking the Tokaido Road. The development of this project was made possible with funding from the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership. The primary objective was to create a rigorous 12-week online K-12 professional development seminar. We also created a slightly less rigorous self-guided experience for educators and the general public. Currently, we are working on materials appropriate for the K-12 classroom. In this presentation, I'll discuss the route, how the program works, how we developed this program, and some of the outcomes and adjustments we've made. Although my comments will be specific to a particular route in Japan, I hope that my comments will assist others who might be interested in creating pedagogical materials and/or a virtual walk on other routes. In the early days of the pandemic, my friend John mentioned to me that he was doing a virtual Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage through My Virtual Mission, and I decided to join him. Within a couple of days, I was hooked, eagerly logging on each day to explore the areas that I was walking through. As I progressed, email postcards appeared in my inbox filled with historical and cultural information about the places I walked on my virtual walk. I even bought a guidebook so I could read more about the places I was virtually visiting. Near the end of the journey, John, a retired high school history teacher who had accompanied me on several K-12 educator study tours to Japan, suggested that I develop a virtual study tour for teachers. Given its history and the wealth of resources, we quickly settled on the Tokaido as the route. Tokaido, which literally means East Sea Route, links the seat of the Edo period government in Edo, now Tokyo, and the Edo period home of the emperor in Kyoto. The Tokaido originated earlier than the 17th century, but it is best known for the Edo period people, places, and activities along it. The Edo Tokaido was part of a larger network of roads known as the Gokaido, or 5 roads, shown in this image. All of the routes have today been supplanted by rail and auto routes, but are still known by their original names. Most of the Nakasendo is rural, and parts of it are popular with hikers today. The Edo Tokaido was and still is a major route of some 319 miles, 513 kilometers, linking Nihonbashi in Edo and Sanjo-Ohashi in Kyoto. 53 stations plus the endpoints supplied travelers with food, lodging, horses, souvenirs, and entertainment. Many of the Edo-era Tokaido stations are now train stations and thus serve as focal points for both historical and contemporary explorations on our journey. Travelers included samurai delegations participating in Sankin Kotai, the alternate residence scheme in which they were required to divide their time and travel between their homes and Edo, traders, religious pilgrims, and entertainers. In 1922, the mainline Tokaido train line, which covers nearly the same route as the Tokaido walking route, was completed. Today it is largely a commuter rail connecting suburbs with urban centers. In 1964, the Tokaido Shinkansen, or bullet train, opened in time for the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. It runs on separate tracks from the main line, and both the main line and the Shinkansen connect with other lines along the way, most significantly in Tokyo and Osaka. The Tokaido Shinkansen carries 143 million passengers annually. A highway, National Route 1, also generally follows the Edo Tokaido, but it runs through heavily urbanized areas and is not intended for long-distance travel. In fact, in 1956, only 2/3 of it was paved. With one pedestrian, one motor vehicle, and 2 train lines covering roughly the same route, we had a wealth of possibilities to work with. Many people outside of Japan know of the Edo Tokaido through ukiyo-e, or woodblock prints, particularly those by the artist Hiroshige. Italian photographer Felice Beato, 1832 to 1909, lived in Yokohama from 1863 to 1877, at the very end of the Edo period through the early years of the Meiji era, and he documented life in Japan, including the Tokaido, as you can see in this photo. We used many ukiyo-e prints in our milestones to emphasize the historical connections and illustrate Edo culture. Another important factor is that the ukiyo-e images, as well as Beato's photos, are in the public domain. Now I'll turn to the details of how this mission works. Using My Virtual Mission as the platform, participants receive a mission code to join. They set a target number of weeks for their walk, customize their profile with a photo if they wish, and then set off on the journey. Distances can be uploaded manually or automatically synced through a number of apps, including Fitbit and Strava. My Virtual Mission also has a new app, which participants tell me works well. On the mission map, you can see the location of each person. Participants can click on their marker to view Google Street View at that location, or they can drop in and view any location on the route. Once a member completes the mission, their icon disappears from the map, but they still have access and continue to explore the route. At each of 17 milestones, participants receive an email which our development team created with an image related to that location, as well as text with historical and cultural information and links to resources, webinars and videos, articles and websites to help them learn about Japanese history and culture. The milestones also pop up on the mission page when they log in for the first time after passing a given milestone location. You can click on an icon to see where you or any other person is on the route. In our seminar discussions and activities, participants are sometimes required to use Google Street View to explore their surroundings. For example, at Hakone, they watch videos about Shinto shrines and then are asked to explore one of the shrines in the area to see what they can identify as part of the Shinto worship experience. The Google Street View yellow human icon can be dropped on the map to explore any location where Google Street View is available, so they don't need to stick to our route to do their explorations. They can go to any place where there's Google Street View. Participants can also go to the map to look for specific places they'd like to explore. What does a McDonald's look like? What about an elementary school? A grocery store? At some locations, you can actually enter a building and explore the indoor space as well. Teachers have really enjoyed exploring outside of schools, even though it's not part of our program, at least not yet. Now for the details of setting up this virtual walk. The first question was, what is it going to cost and where will I get the money? I contacted My Virtual Mission and discovered that the cost for creating a custom mission, their term for these walks, would be very reasonable. The current cost is $7 per person with a $250 minimum. I wrote a grant to the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership to pay the development team, whose names you see on the screen here, and cover the fees for the spring and summer 2021 participants. I asked the 3 other educators you see here, all with experience developing K-12 professional development programming, to join me. Our goal was to create a virtual experience that would last 12 weeks for a group which would interact both synchronously and asynchronously, while also crafting a self-guided, completely asynchronous program. We began by brainstorming a list of topics and matching them to Edo-era stations on the Tokaido, and that list quickly swelled to about 30 topics. Many Zoom meetings and emails later, we settled on 10 topics and stations, with 7 optional topics and stations that teachers could explore according to their interests. As you can see from the list, we cover history, culture, religion, transportation, agriculture, sports, literature, music, art, and more. Some of the things we regrettably weren't able to include, but which could be the topic of individual investigation, include the Namamugi incident, beer factories that exist on the route today, Japanese Brazilian workers, musical instrument manufacturing, foreign delegations on the Tokaido, and Christian martyrs and the Tokaido. We divided the 17 stations between us to research and create milestones, selected books and other resources, and created discussion prompts. The people or organization creating a custom mission on my virtual mission is responsible for doing all the work on the platform, including setting up the route and uploading the milestones. But it's very easy to do. John spent 10 hours painstakingly laying out the route, sometimes block by block, after which we uploaded the milestones and accompanying photos. We read many books and chose several as texts for the seminar. On this slide, you'll see images of the books we selected, as well as a few of the milestone photos. We scheduled a number of webinars with experts, including the authors of 2 of the books. The webinars were recorded and archived for future participants. After the spring 2021 cohort completed and evaluated their experience, the project development team revised the milestones, adjusted the readings, and added resources. In summer 2021, we offered 2 tracks, one for educators who wished to participate in the rigorous academic track, and one for the general public who received the milestones and the book list, but for whom there were no formal requirements to complete any work. 100 teachers enrolled in the educator track, and 40 signed up for the general public track. In fall 2021, one teacher is using the experience with his 70 high school history students. And by the end of 2021, we will have a suggested plan of study that can be used in the classroom either on the My Virtual Mission platform by paying the required fees to the center, or simply by using the regular Google Street View. In January 2022, we will make the syllabus and milestones available for teachers to use independently of My Virtual Mission, and we'll also continue to offer the seminar to small cohorts of teachers each semester. We have to overcome some institutional payment hurdles to continue to offer it to non-educators, as our grant funding only covers K-12 teachers. Other lessons learned and adjustments made. Our spring 2021 cohort was really into milestone 8, tea cultivation, production, and culture. We added additional videos as well as a virtual green tea tasting experience with a company from Japan called D-Matcha. These were for small groups. We also added a virtual Kyoto Zen garden tour, again for small groups, to fill what we perceived to be a hole in our cultural offerings. And we contracted with On Design in Kyoto for that. In response to a request for resources on traditional architecture, we added Machiya, a traditional Kyoto-style house at Otsu at mile 16. And this is by means of a website for Hachisei, a real estate company that specializes in Machiya. At milestone 5, where the topic is Shinto religion, teachers commented that their students are much more knowledgeable about the appearance of Shinto in manga and anime than they are. We added 2 webinars in fall 2021 on that topic, and those were recorded and archived for future cohorts. And those were done by Caitlin Ugoretz of Eat, Pray, Anime. She's a doctoral student at UCSB. I'd like to wrap up by looking at a few of the specific activities and discussion prompts that are included in our journey. At our departure point, Nihonbashi in Edo, today Tokyo, I asked them to drop in on Street View and compare the bridge today with Hiroshige's ukiyo-e of the same location. Note that today the bridge is under the overhead expressway and barely visible until you're actually walking on it. They also read a short article on plans to move the expressway underground. The expressway was originally built for the 1964 Olympics, so we circle back to this when we reach Narumi and they view a webinar on the Olympics. In the Edo period, travelers were required to have a transit permit to travel along the Tokaido and other roads. At milestone 10, Arai, we look at two examples of Edo period transit permits that have been translated into English. This ties in with our discussion at Okitsu about who is allowed to travel, for what purposes, and who grants permission to travel. These also help us to think about the role of women on the Tokaido. In addition, K-12 teachers are always looking for primary sources, so these are great documents for them. At Narumi, we take up the topic of sports, the Olympics, baseball, and sumo. One of their tasks is to view a short video on chanko nabe, the signature dish of sumo wrestlers that you see here. Discussions can go many ways from here. What are the ingredients, their nutritional value, number of calories ingested, etc. From there, discussions might move to questions about sports in the US and any associated food or food practices. We wanted to include something on the environment, and a newspaper article on environmental tourism in Yokkaichi is the perfect starting point for these discussions. Participants also read a couple of short papers on the history of environmental activism in Japan, which include a chronology of environmental disasters over the past 140 years. And they view a short video of nighttime factory tourism in Yokkaichi. You can see an example of that in the photo on this slide. Questions we've discussed in our online forums are environmental tourism sites in the US, candidates for such, and environmental issues in the local school, town, or region. Many people have heard of the Japanese haiku poet Basho, who traveled extensively in Japan. However, he avoided the Tokaido for the most part. He did write one haiku at Tsuchiyama, near the Kyoto end of the route. The poem references a long ago meeting with a friend on a journey. We use this work to include literature and ask participants to write a haiku on the topic of a journey with a friend. This particular haiku is also useful in pointing out that one doesn't have to stick to the 5-7-5 syllable structure that haiku is known for. This one is 7-7-5. Even if you don't read Japanese, if you look at the second line of Japanese writing, each character is one syllable. It says the same thing as the first line, only using the syllabary instead of Chinese characters. And it says, and I'll break at the end of each line, Inochi futatsu no naka ni ikitaru sakura kana. So you can count the syllables. Inochi futatsu no naka ni ikitaru sakura kana. Finally, one of the most fun activities is searching for images which reference Hiroshige's The Great Wave off Kanagawa, which is the image you see in the background. More than 100 people have contributed images to this discussion with very little duplication. One of the most recent contributions is the 2-lane green wave logo in the lower left-hand corner. We don't know if it was inspired by the Great Wave, but the teacher contributor sees Mount Fuji in the clenched hand being overshadowed by the wave at the top of the head of the logo. Thank you for your interest in our virtual Walking the Tokaido. I hope I've provided an adequate overview of why and how my team and I constructed this unique learning experience, and have perhaps inspired you or given you the confidence to try a similar project with your own students.